Have you ever wondered how a language spoken like over 1,000 years ago could still be around today, echoing in the languages we hear all the time?
It's wild, isn't it?
It's like unbelievable, right? But that's what we're getting into today with this whole Old Church Slavonic thing. And I gotta say, I'm hooked. This isn't just some like dusty old language.
Right.
This is like the bedrock.
Yeah.
For a huge chunk of Europe, linguistically.
It's incredible, and what's so fascinating about Old Church Slavonic, or OCS, is that it gives us this glimpse into the roots of languages, like, Russian, Polish, Czech.
It's amazing.
It's incredible, and it wasn't just any language, you see. It was like the first Slavic language to have a written form.
Wow.
Which makes it so valuable for understanding how these languages evolved.
Totally. And the story of how it spread. It's fascinating, like so intertwined with Christianity in Eastern Europe. And it all starts, as these stories often do, with two brothers, Cyril and Methodius. Of course, these guys, these missionaries, they were basically told, hey, create an alphabet from scratch.
Chuckles.
And, translate these religious texts you've got like a week, go. Can you imagine?
It's mind-boggling. They were sent to Great Moravia today. That's like the Czech Republic, Slovakia.
Right.
By the Byzantine Empire. Imagine having to invent an alphabet, the Glagolitic alphabet, as it's known.
Right.
And translate the Bible into a language. I mean, you'd mostly only heard it spoken.
Wow.
It's a testament to them that they pulled this off.
I'm curious, though. Was there a specific reason they decided, let's make a whole new alphabet? Like, why not just use Greek, Latin, something that already existed?
That's a great question, and it gets to the core of their mission, really. Cyril and Methodius. They wanted to make the liturgy, the services, accessible to Slavic people, but not just in any way, in a way that felt real, relatable,
right.
Creating a whole new alphabet, one that fit the sounds of their language. That was key to making that happen.
Makes you wonder if they were ever tempted to just be like, you know what, let's just get a really big pot of coffee and call it a day. Because get this, there's a theory that this massive, massive project, it might have originally been meant for Bulgaria.
It's true. Linguists have found these amazing links between Old Church Slavonic and certain Slavic dialects. One's from around Thessalonica, actually, where Cyril and Methodius were from. It's like a linguistic detective story.
Wow.
Some scholars think their work was all part of this bigger plan to bring literacy, Christianity, the whole nine yards to Bulgaria.
So they put their heart and soul into this, create this new alphabet, translate these texts. And what happened in Moravia? Did it stick?
Sadly, no, not really. It was short-lived.
Oh.
See, they had success, but then Pope Stephen V stepped in. He insisted on Latin, only Latin, for religious texts.
Oh.
So clash of styles, tradition versus innovation. They were asked to leave, but crucially, their work, it didn't just vanish.
Okay, good.
It found a new home.
Okay. Finds a new home. We're talking Bulgaria, right?
Exactly.
But how does a language, even one with a brand new alphabet, like take root, really flourish? Back then, it's not like they had printing presses or the internet or anything.
You're right. It was a time of meticulous copying by hand. You had these dedicated scholars in centers of learning that honestly rivaled any modern university.
Wow.
Tsar Boris of Bulgaria, he recognized what Cyril and Methodius had started. And he established these incredible places, the Preslav and Ohrid literary schools.
So like the think tanks of their time, but all about Old Church Slavonic.
Precisely. They weren't just copying, though. I mean, they were refining the language, building up its vocabulary, making sure it could handle, anything you wanted to write, not just religious stuff. And here's where it gets really interesting, because remember, we have two alphabets for this one language.
Right. Glagolitic.
Yeah.
That's the one Cyril and Methodius came up with. And then Cyrillic, which we haven't really gotten into yet.
Right.
So was there like a big alphabet battle in Bulgaria? Like which one was going to be top dog?
Maybe not a battle royale, but there's definitely some competition, yeah.
Laughs.
The Cyrillic alphabet, that one was developed at the Preslav school. It just proved more, I guess, efficient, adaptable over time. And it's the one we see today. Russian, Serbian, Bulgarian, they all use it.
Oh.
Glagolitic, though. It's beautiful, intricate, but it kind of faded out.
I can imagine. It's just wild to think of these two scripts, side by side, each one telling the Old Church Slavonic story in its own way.
But Bulgaria wasn't the end of the road for OCS, was it?
Not at all. From Bulgaria, it's like Old Church Slavonic just spread out like ripples. It got to Croatia, Serbia, Bohemia, even made its way over to Kievan Rus', the precursor to Ukraine and parts of Russia.
Wow.
Think about it. The influence, that kind of cultural exchange just through language, it's incredible. Yeah. It really paints this picture like how connected everything was, especially back then. We tend to think of it as like everyone's isolated, but was it the exact same Old Church Slavonic everyone was speaking? Or as it went to these new places, did it start to, I don't know, change?
That's where it gets even more fascinating. Languages, they're alive,
Yeah.
So as Old Church Slavonic is spreading, it's meeting these different dialects, different ways of speaking.
Right.
And it starts to, pick up these local flavors. Linguists call them recensions.
Okay.
It's like, think of different accents.
Right.
Unique words, phrases, even small changes to the grammar.
So like everyone's adding their own spice to the recipe.
Yeah.
You've got Bulgarian, Old Church Slavonic, Croatian, OCS, Serbian, each one distinct, but still they've got those common roots.
Exactly. And here's where it diverges even more from, say, what was happening in the West. With Latin, that was the language, right? Scholarship, religion.
Right.
But in the East, Old Church Slavonic, it was more than just for the liturgy. It was closer to how people actually spoke day to day.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So you could be like at a church service and you understand everything, the words, the prayers. It's not some like distant language. It's something you connect with.
Exactly.
It really makes you wonder what it would have been like to hear Old Church Slavonic spoken, like back in the day.
Oh, I know.
Imagine walking through a marketplace, hearing those sounds, or even in a monastery, like the quiet chanting.
It's a question that keeps linguists up at night, believe me. But the cool thing is, Old Church Slavonic itself, it holds some clues, especially when it comes to the sounds, how it actually sounded.
Oh, really?
Like, for instance, did you know OCS had these things called yers? They were these ultra-short vowels.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're almost like whispers, barely there. But they tell us a lot about how the language worked.
Whispered vowels, that's wild.
Most Slavic languages today, they've lost them completely. But in OCS, we can still find them. It's amazing. And then there are the nasal vowels.
Like in French?
Exactly. But they used to be in Slavic languages, too.
Ah.
These sounds, it's like they're perfectly preserved, like fossils almost. And they give us this chance to reconstruct what Proto-Slavic might have sounded like.
Wow. So we're talking about the ancestor of all the Slavic languages.
Exactly.
That's like listening to a recording of history, but the recording is hidden inside the language itself.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of clues to the past,
Yeah.
we've got to talk about those alphabets.
Oh, absolutely. Glagolitic, the one Cyril and Methodius created.
Yeah.
It is truly something to see.
Really?
The letters are intricate, almost decorative. You see it written out, and you have to wonder about the minds that came up with that.
Like a work of art almost, as much as an alphabet.
Exactly. And then there's Cyrillic, which, well, as we said, it's still around today.
Right. It's amazing to think something made over 1,000 years ago, it's still shaping how we communicate.
It really is.
But it wasn't just sounds and scripts that made Old Church Slavonic so unique. It also had this reputation for being, pretty complex, grammatically speaking.
Old Church Slavonic, it is a grammar lover's dream. Cases, declensions, verb tenses that are just, wow. But there's this one thing, it's my favorite. The dual number.
The dual number. Okay, that one, I gotta admit, went a little over my head.
It's this grammatical feature. Sadly, most Slavic languages have lost it now. But it was specifically for things that came in pairs.
Pairs, like
2 hands, 2 eyes, 2 oxen, yoked together.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of saying like 2 hands, you'd have this whole other word, this form, just for that concept of a pair.
Wow.
It's like their whole way of seeing the world was different. That duality, that two-ness, it was built right into the grammar.
That's so cool.
And, it might seem complicated to us now, but all that detail, it makes Old Church Slavonic so valuable for linguists. It's how we trace how these languages are related, how they split off, became their own things.
So we've got these sounds, the scripts, the grammar, but we can't forget about those recensions. The regional variations we were talking about. Did they all just get along, or were there some, linguistic turf wars?
Languages are always changing, always adapting, and Old Church Slavonic is no exception. There are some really interesting examples of this. Like, take the Bosnian recension. It was written in a script called Bosančica.
Bosančica.
It's still a bit of a mystery, even to scholars, but it shows how OCS could be molded, changed to fit what different communities needed.
So even within Old Church Slavonic, there's this drive to make it their own.
Exactly. And this whole idea, unity versus diversity, it pops up again and again. In 19th century Bulgaria, they had this huge debate. Should they stick with Old Church Slavonic or switch to something closer to how people were speaking then?
It's like Old Church Slavonic was about way more than just words. It was tied up in identity, faith, even politics.
Exactly. Like in Serbia, they made a conscious decision to move away from OCS. They wanted to build their literary language on a specific dialect. And that had a huge effect on Serbian culture.
Wow. It makes you realize language is never neutral.
Never. It says so much about who we are.
So what started as this mission to bring literacy to a few communities back in the 9th century,
Right.
it ends up shaping like a whole continent linguistically. That's incredible.
That's the beauty of studying languages. They connect us to the past in ways we don't even realize.
It really makes you want to go exploring. So for our listeners who are now hopefully as fascinated by Old Church Slavonic as we are, where would you even start if you wanted to learn more?
Honestly, I think that's up to them. Every Slavic language, Polish, Russian, Czech, Bulgarian, they each give you a different perspective on Old Church Slavonic's legacy.
It's like this linguistic treasure hunt.
Exactly.
Well, what a fantastic note to end on. It's been a pleasure, as always, diving into this with you.
Likewise.
And to our listeners, happy exploring.